Only 15% of the vote had come in. 15% of the total vote had come in. Only that small amount. And Fox News Network and two other sellout networks, I think it was NBC and ABC, but most importantly Fox News, they called the election with only 15% of the total vote coming in. And there were also all these challenges and reports of foul play in Arizona. Now, I don't know whether or not there was foul play or not, but it was interesting to watch. I happened to be watching Fox News Network live when they called Arizona, and they were militant about it. And the Fox News commentator who was up there, you know, with the fancy boards, the puzzle boards, you know, that you can flip around and move like what do you call it? Kids' Lego game, you know what I'm talking about? Fox News has the fanciest Lego game type graphics and charts, and they look like toys you can play with. You spin it around, and what you can do is this multicolored display. You press a television button, and the computer is supposed to show you how either Biden or Trump can win a path to victory, and they press certain states in, and the computer shows a red map or a blue map, and it illustrates what is needed for a candidate to win the presidency. And they're supposed to keep updating it as they get more facts. But the guy who's running it, he's been with Fox News about 15 years at least, he looked perplexed, because every time he tried to get the computer display to work, it wouldn't work. And he tried it over and over again, and then he kind of got upset because he was working with like no sleep for 3 days, and he banged it, and it still didn't work, and then he started to try to force it because he was getting frustrated. And somebody said something to him, and I couldn't hear what was said to him, but it was something to the effect of, you're locked out. You're locked out from using this vote projection system. And he kind of said, what do you mean? He said, they called it. They called it, and he looked perplexed. Who's they? And then they sheepishly, whoever was talking to him, and there was one of the girls from Fox News that she said, when they called it, then she said the whole thing. She said, Fox News called it. So it went from they called it, an ambiguous they, to Fox News called it, and then I guess two other big networks called it. And because Fox News called the election for Biden with only 15% of the vote in, and they would not back off because, quote, they called it. And he said, well, how can they call it live on air? There's only 15% of the vote in. And he was just baffled. And then somebody tried, the female host, tried to take the heat off the situation with a joke, and she said, well, no, she didn't say it with a joke. Her excuse was, he said, who's they? They called it. She goes, well, Fox News. And he realizes he has to be careful because he's on Fox News. He works for Fox News. And then he said, well, how can they call it? There's only 15% of the vote in. And that was true, but then she said, well, so then she took it to a higher level of authority to him live on the air. She said, well, the decision desk, and then she pointed upstairs to the floor upstairs. She said the decision desk called it. The Fox decision desk called it. So the con game, wrapped in humor, was to look into the face of the Fox News audience and essentially lie to them by claiming or alleging that there's a Fox News decision desk, which is an attempt to make you believe that there's some kind of impartial, fair, and unbiased authority system, accountability system at Fox News that overrides the people on camera, overrides the TV commentators, overrides the Fox commentators, theoretically overrides the Fox CEOs, and they're called the Fox News Decision Desk. Now, we were never told who is in this decision desk, what are the rules of the decision desk, or anything else. We were just told to shut up, basically shut up and accept it, because the Fox News Network Decision Desk has called it. Well, with all respect, having been on Fox News Network countless times for over 10 years or more, there never was, and to my knowledge, I could be wrong, and I'll retract. I'm not saying it as a fact, okay? I'm saying to the best of my knowledge, and I could be wrong, okay? But having been at Fox News in Manhattan many times, as a guest on many big shows, having been in the office above where the television studios are, I've spent time in in the floor above where her finger was pointing to the so-called Fox News Network Decision Desk. Well, I've been up there. I talked to big executives up there. And there's no Fox News Decision Desk up there unless they redesigned the whole floor. The floor above is a floor basically that consists, well, there's several floors above the studios. And some floors are for the producers of Fox, the bookers who get the guests on, and then you have the lower level managers and VPs and stuff. And then on the higher level floor, you have where the executive offices are for the people who really run Fox News Network and the other big CEOs. The people with the real power at Fox News, they all are on the floor, with the highest level floor. So I imagine that when the Murdoch kids and daughter and Murdoch himself comes, they have their offices up there. And then the president of Fox News, and they all have their offices up there. So the management of Fox News is up there. There's no decision desk. If it was meant as sarcasm, I don't think it was meant as sarcasm, because first of all, it's not funny. Second of all, they would have, if it was sarcasm, they would have backed out of it. They would have cooled their jets, because there are now reports, and basically what this did, and that's why I've been bombarded on social media with like tombstone with Fox News on it, and then it says, "May it rest in peace." And Fox News died like a week or two ago when they called Arizona, and they wouldn't back off of it. In light of the fact that there has been continuous evidence that challenges the fact that Fox News Network called it, and it's still being investigated, why would you militantly not back down? Basically, Fox News was telling its audience, they were telling perhaps the newly arrived Biden regime, they were telling the deep state, and they were telling their viewers and non-viewers that we've changed. This is a departure, and don't expect us to be the Fox conservative news network you knew in the past. This is a whole different ballgame. So they sent a message, but that message also contained, and please, I'm not trying to be vulgar, but it was a very strong message sent to the Fox News viewer. I'm not trying to be vulgar, but essentially they gave the middle finger to their entire conservative audience. Fox News became the most powerful, became the most viewed cable news network ever. It became gigantic with its power and influence. But Fox, and I was on it constantly on their biggest shows, and Fox has been changing incrementally, but basically they disrespected the audience. That Fox News Network did not build the power of Fox News. Yeah, they had some smart people like Roger Ailes and others involved. They had some talented commentators and hosts. But none of those guys or girls built Fox News. What built Fox News Network was the loyalty of their fans and their viewers. The secret of Fox News was never Fox News. The secret of Fox News was they got out of the way and they mirrored the political beliefs, the moral beliefs, the American values, the economic beliefs. Fox succeeded and became powerful and developed the biggest audience because they reflected the values, the conservative values of the hundreds of millions of people in America who were being attacked, insulted, demeaned, and belittled by all the other media and all the other mainstream media. That's the reason Fox went through the roof. So when they decided to say goodbye to their faithful audience, and they did it in the most insulting way. In other words, now that Murdoch is the Murdoch father who built it, now that he's old, the sons and the daughter, some combination, are running it. So instead of respecting your viewers that were with you for whatever they were on, 10, 20 years, well, no, there was 15 to 20 years they were on the air. Instead of respecting that dynamic, instead of respecting the relationship between Fox News and its commentators, Fox News itself and its audience, instead of respecting that, instead of valuing that relationship, which made Fox a ton of money, they trashed it in a cheap, sleazy way by insulting their audience. Because to do that is demeaning and insulting. And then, after receiving an avalanche of criticism, which goes on to this day, they've lost it. I guess it depends what day. Some of their most popular shows and their biggest hosts have had their shows suspended. Okay? The shows that always generated the biggest numbers, the shows that I was on, always had a conservative lean to them. So they basically disrespected that, and their ratings, the polls that show how many people are now watching Fox News in comparison to the other networks, Fox News is losing. I mean, in some days they've lost 50% of their viewers. And people are now flooding even more to alternative media networks, alternative social media, or alternative internet sites. Are all experiencing a increase of people fleeing from Fox. And there's some television channels that are skyrocketing and may well replace Fox News Network quickly, because people have nowhere to go. What has happened is Fox News Network, the personal liberal ideology of the Fox kids, the daughter and the sons who are running Fox News Network, they are running it according to their personal liberal ideology. And so there's just a ton of social media lamenting the fact that Fox is gone. Now, that is a big brother move. And you say, well, why would Fox do that? Because it is an antithesis to the basic business model, basic economics. And it was very interesting that the vast majority of the interviews I had and the on-air debates I had while being a frequent guest of the biggest shows on Fox News Network, a huge percentage of my appearances had to deal with economic, monetary policies and financial debates. So I would be on the Fox News Network, O'Reilly and the other big shows, and then I would be on the Fox Business Channel financial programs. So, and they had me on to debate economics. Now, anybody who understands diddly squat about economics understands that there are some basic economic principles that create profit, and the violation of these economic principles creates loss. Every business knows that. So, for example, in a massive percentage of businesses, just about every business runs on some kind of business model in which you have to treat your customers properly. You have to treat your buyers or your customers or your investors, the people that are rewarding you as a business. So, for example, Fox News or television business, when people are watching Fox News, they are rewarding Fox News because the fact that people are watching Fox News is based on the fact that Fox News is delivering to them a product, an information product, a television product, which interests and affirms a very big audience. Now, they make money on that, thus the implementation of the economic principle, because Fox is, when they are meeting the needs of their audience and respecting the needs of their audience, they're attracting a larger audience, which means their advertisers are exposing their products and services to a larger audience, which means that vastly more people are going to buy those products and services being featured on the Fox News network. And that makes a ton of money for the businesses that advertise on Fox News Network. That makes a ton of money for Fox News Network because by featuring programming that respects their audience's values, they are attracting a bigger audience. That's basic economics. But one major reason that the American automobile manufacturers ran into serious problems for for a decade or more was that to the consumer, that's me and you, the American cars, I'm not talking about trucks because trucks are the truck division of many American cars. The truck division is like completely different. The truck division is like, many times in American cars, it's just the ratings are impeccable. You don't see the complaints, but that's in the truck divisions. Also, with American cars, there are certain car names under the umbrella of the big car companies, the American car companies, that are excellent and that have an excellent reputation. But I'm saying the overall reputation, with the exception of trucks and certain other models, was a bad reputation. It's an inferior product. American car companies had a working practice. They wouldn't fix the inherent problems in the car. They would wait till somebody bought the car. Then when the person noticed there was a problem with it, they'd have the person come back into the dealership and have the car repaired. Think of the lack of integrity among the corporate CEOs that would allow them to be so immoral and so unethical to deliberately sell cars, reward your customers when they buy your car by deliberately and knowingly sell them cars which are defective, and then they don't fix them from the factory. They wait till the customer has a problem, and then when the customer has to come in, they'll fix it. That's a lousy practice, all right? And so the American, not all of them, but there was a sizable percentage of American automobile manufacturers that had these very unethical practices. And I even had, people educate me about this. I'm not a mechanic, I'm not an engineer type, but I remember sitting with my father-in-law, and he was driving a car, and he was teaching me about cars because he was into engineering and all kinds of things. And he said, "Paul, I want you to look at that car in front of us on the highway right now. Tell me what you see." And I said, I see a car. I gave him the color. I gave him a stupid answer because my perception had not been educated, okay, like his. He said, "No, I want you to look carefully at that car. Do you see anything strange about it?" And I couldn't see it. And then he pointed to another car on the freeway. He said, "I want you to look at that car." He said, "What do you see there?" And while I was thinking, he said, "I want you to look at the back of that car carefully and then compare it to the back of that car." And then I still didn't get it. And then he showed me, because he had trained eyes. Like I said, he was into mechanics and engineering. And he showed me a very obvious problem that showed up visually in one of the cars, which was the American-made car. The balance of looking at the car from the rear, you could see it was crooked. And it wasn't because one tire had low air pressure. The bumper, the way the hood, not the hood, the back thing, what do you call it? I'm forgetting. The rear of the car, the trunk, the way that landed. If you were an artist and you were drawing the lines of this American car, you would, if you're an artist and if you were trying to give an accurate drawing of this American car from the back, that the lines were all crooked. He said, "That's not a small thing, Paul, that the lines are all crooked." He said, "They did not take the time in the factory when they were assembling this car to assemble it properly. That they had no integrity in the manufacturing. Because had they taken the time to put in those pieces properly, they should be, if they made their own car right, all the lines should be straight. They should all be straight because it's all connected to the balance and a whole bunch of other things." And he said, if we continue to look at the car, you can see all kinds of flaws visually evident in this American car. And he said, because it isn't made properly. And then he said, that's why I drive a Japanese car. And then he pointed out the Japanese car, and those same lines were perfect. And he said, those lines are perfect because they have a standard of excellence in their manufacturing, and they won't allow a car to come out like that American car. And then, just to open my eyes some more, he showed me a few more Japanese car companies, and we looked at the back of a number of other Japanese car companies of the car. Everything was straight, everything was perfect. And then he showed me a few more American models, and they were all, it was like they were defective. It was like they had gotten into an accident and somebody slapped together the repair. No, none of the American cars had gotten into accidents. Their manufacturing standards were inferior. And that's the way American car companies did business. And that showed up in the engine quality, as well as the rear, everything. And so I began to become educated. Knowledge is power, but the only way you get knowledge is you have to access information, facts, data that's correct. If you simply go by what somebody's telling you, oh, this is the greatest design car in the world, you're going to get into big trouble. So that's how I began to learn. So when you make something with a lack of integrity, when you produce something with a lack of integrity, in older days, in earlier times in America, whether a guy was a shoe repairman or a locksmith or an auto mechanic or whatever it was, there were American values that were based on biblical values. And integrity was a value that was embraced and practiced by your average American. It doesn't mean everybody actually did practice it, but integrity. You've heard that expression. Let's shake hands on it. I'm good for it. I'm as good as my word. If I say it, I'm going to do it. Well, today people laugh at that. They want a lawyer's contract. Why? Why do people want a lawyer's contract today on everything? Because there's no integrity in a man or a woman's word anymore. It's meaningless. The expectation is that this man or woman is going to lie to you or cheat you unless you have a legal contract. So the integrity of a man or a woman's word, the integrity of a company or a business, whether it's a restaurant or an automobile manufacturer, that is meaningless. What America values now, and see, what is integrity? I'm as good as my word. They wouldn't think, Americans wouldn't think of putting together, assembling, manufacturing, or producing a defective product and selling it to you and telling you it's good. That would be unthinkable. Today, it's the norm. It's the part of the new norm. So, the root of this is not Democrats, it's not Republicans, it's not Washington, D.C., it's not politicians. The way to fix that problem in America is to address and own the fact that that's a spiritual problem. When you're willing to betray your word, you're lying. When you're willing to betray your word, you're deceiving. When you're willing to manufacture products which you know are defective, and you know the person you sold them to on good faith because they're trusting your word is going to experience harm, financial loss, and big problems, and yet you're willing to sell your soul and sell it to him anyway, you got a problem. What the real problem is a lack of integrity. What does a lack of integrity mean? A lack of integrity in the economic realm, a lack of integrity in the financial system, a lack of integrity in economics, a lack of integrity in the monetary system, is merely an indication of a deeper lack of integrity, and that lack of integrity begins in the spirit of a man or a woman or a corporate entity or a business or whatever. It starts, though, with individuals. The individual is willing to lie to you to make money. The individual is willing to deceive you by saying something is excellent when you know it's very, very inferior. That deception is, to be blunt, that's lying to you. In America, over the last 125 years, we have moved from a nation of individuals who prioritized truth, who prioritized excellence, quality, and integrity. We moved from being people of that caliber, and we, all of us, to one degree or another, have sold our souls when we stopped putting a value on integrity, truthfulness, and good production, etc. Because when you practice deception in your business, whether it's a product or service, when you accept lying as the norm in your product or business or as a person, what you're really saying is, what you're really doing is, you have chosen to become a person of the lie. A person who becomes a person of the lie, when you get right down to it, is a person who not only has chosen to be a person of the lie, but because they have chosen to be a person of the lie, they have also, whether they realize it or not, they have chosen to sell their soul in pieces incrementally. Because when you choose to become a person of the lie, you also choose to become, to whatever degree, a servant of Lucifer or Satan. You are now a man or a woman who is a servant of Lucifer or Satan and a child of the darkness.